listen-only mode.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Search Laboratory, entitled Joining Offline Conversions to Online Clicks. My name is Chris Attewell. I am the SVP of Global Sales for Search Laboratory, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. The main presenter today is our Head of Analytics, Paul Shearing, who I'll be introducing shortly. For those not familiar with Search Laboratory, we were founded in 2005 and grew rapidly to become one of the UK's leading digital marketing agencies before opening our first office in the US in New York in 2014. We specialize in search marketing, social media and display advertising, and importantly for this session, analytics, consultancy and insights. Data science has really always been at the heart of everything that we do, and this scientific core is the main reason why we're called the Search Laboratory. On the subject of today's webinar, we find that for a lot of our clients, analytics is now the single most important element of their digital marketing focus. In fact, a recent study from Google showed that over 80% of senior marketers say that attribution is the biggest challenge, but around 70% of those people feel that it's difficult and they struggle to see where to start. The technology's become really advanced with attribution modeling tools, integrations with online and offline data sources, and audience building, which means that navigating through this technology is becoming increasingly difficult for a lot of people. But it's really critical if you're going to beat your competitors online. So our mission today is to help you with this, and we're looking at one subset of this landscape, and that is joining offline data to analytics. The possibilities in this area have really leapt forwards over the past few years, and the goal of the next 45 minutes is to share some insights and examples and to give away techniques that you can go back to your own businesses and apply to your own campaigns. Just to cover off some housekeeping points, the webinar will last around 45 minutes. There will be some time at the end if there are any questions. We would love to hear questions. Please send these in via the chat function as we move through the presentation. And we've set aside some time at the end and we'll be able to answer as many of these questions as we can. We are also recording the webinar and we'll share it out via email in the next 24 hours. So don't worry too much about taking notes or screenshots as we go. So it's my pleasure now to introduce you to the presenter for the webinar, Paul Shearing. Paul has been with Search Laboratory for 11 years, and in that time has been instrumental in our focus on data in particular. He built the foundations of our statistical bid management software, BidLab, and he now heads up our analytics and data science team. Paul's background actually before Search Laboratory was in actuarial analysis, so making sense of huge data sets is really Paul's speciality. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Paul.
Hi, thanks Chris, and welcome to everybody out there. So yeah, I suppose it's going to be my job today then to talk you through kind of the problem and this solution that exists now. So if we kind of run So if I kind of run through the kind of agenda of what I'll be taking you through then, so I'll run through a few slides of exactly what the problem is, just to make sure it's clear, and there's different problems for different businesses, so we'll run through that. I'll then quickly run through the kind of solution that exists out there and the basic mechanics of how it works, which should give you the understanding you need to go and make sense of it and go about implementing something. And then I'll run through a few example scenarios and how it actually works in practice and some of the results we've seen by doing this. And then finally, there'll be plenty of time at the end, hopefully, for questions. So, like Chris said, if you use the chat feature to add any questions, we'll pick those up and get back to you as soon as we can afterwards. So if I dive straight in then, I suppose just to present the problem as it stands. So a typical lead generation website, as this example shows, might be very good at tracking different sessions and different channels and how they drive a visitor to your website. So we're very good nowadays at understanding how people are getting to the website and what they do on the website. So in this example, lead generation, typically you want people to fill in a form. So we've got very good data around that. But all campaigns are not equal, and those web forms go on to convert to sales at very different rates depending on what keyword, what campaign that comes from. So, the example you can see now on the screen is a typical kind of B2B lead generation kind of company. So, typically you would get back on the phone to somebody who's filled in a form. Hopefully, if things go well and they're suitable, you'd book a meeting, and which hopefully down the line would turn into a sale or a contract sign. And without this full insight of what's going on after the web form, it's very hard to make marketing decisions, and you're left making a lot of assumptions. So to go through another example, this is kind of a B2C type of website that has as a conversion strategy promoting samples. So I'm thinking curtains, blinds, wooden flooring, all things people want a sample before they commit to making a purchase. So, we can see very well what's driving those sample requests. But again, what happens after that often happens offline. So typically, they might then phone in and make the purchase over the phone, or even if you've got a good setup, you might be phoning them to try and push the sale through, and this happens offline and doesn't make it to your analytics account, so you can't really see what's driving those sales very easily. Again, this is big problem for any online, for any high street retailer that has an online presence, and you can spend thousands of pounds and dollars on driving traffic to your website, and seemingly a lot of these people are engaging with your website, but they don't seem to go on and do a right lot. So you're left scratching your head a little bit about, is it a worthwhile campaign? The reality might be that a lot of them, or all of them, are going into stores and making purchases, and understanding how your online campaigns are driving footfall and in-store purchases is a huge problem that a lot of retailers face. So this is a slightly, I suppose, more complex example, and it's kind of a typical catalogue business. And I've said B2B here, but it could equally be a B2C example. So, the old traditional mail order catalogue company, or an office supplies kind of organisation. So, typically a company like this would have a website, and they might be able to see all the different channels that are driving online sales. But a company like that has much more involved and complex marketing activities, and you might be missing a huge picture of that. So you can see here, you might be doing a lot of direct mail and direct marketing. You might send out catalogues every 6 months, a few months. You might take transactions and sales over the phone, or even in store if you've got a high street presence. And finally, the problem that every retailer faces is returns and refunds. Often these occur offline. So, that's the problem. Without this full insight and full picture, you're left with half the story. So I've shown you a graphical illustration of some of the problems that we face, and I just wanted to present that in a more solid form, and a kind of using the data. So if we look back at a B2B, typical B2B website, let's say you've got two campaigns, one selling CRM solutions, one selling cloud-based CRM solutions. CRM is a customer relationship management piece of software that people manage their customer relationship with. So, in the example here, you'd be forgiven for thinking these two campaigns are indifferent and each as good as each other. But then if you supplemented that with what goes on afterwards, after the web form is submitted, there's a very different picture in this example. And as you can see here, this cloud-based CRM solution campaign seems to be converting to sales at a much higher rate. And if you had this full picture, you could make very different marketing decisions about where you put budget. So it's a real opportunity for people who get in first and do this type of thing. Again, this is the kind of curtain and blind sample illustration. So, a company like that might sell curtains and blinds, and from this, the conversion rate for curtains seems to be a bit low. You'd be forgiven for thinking it's not as good a campaign. But then if you supplement that with further information, it might, you might suddenly discover that actually those conversions that do convert from curtains campaign are actually a lot higher. And as you can see here, the ROI is very different. Again, you'd make very different budget decisions if you had this full picture. A research online buying store. So this is the high street retail example. I've got here a fashion company who might have a campaign for socks and a campaign for dresses. On the face of it, what you can see online, the socks seem to be doing a lot better than the dresses campaign. But then when you supplement it with the full picture about what's happening in store as well, you can see there that there's a dramatically different view of things now. And you might hypothesize in this case that people are just happy to buy socks online, but if they're buying a dress, they want to go and touch and feel it and try it on. So that's the problem as we see it, and that every company faces really. So now I'll dive straight into the kind of solution, and the solution we're going to present is using Google Analytics. If you use other analytics software, there are other solutions, very similar solutions, but obviously I'll be just focusing on the Google Analytics version today. So I suppose to present this solution, there's two key concepts really that we need to understand, and that kind of underpin the whole solution. So the first one is something called the measurement protocol, and this is a Google feature. And ultimately, I'll go into this in detail shortly, but ultimately this is the how you get data into Google Analytics. The second concept is what I'll refer to as the join key, and there's two different ways of doing this, using Google's ID and an ID from your CRM, but this ultimately is about how you join what's going on offline to the activity that you've experienced online, because otherwise there'd be just two separate bits of activity that wouldn't mean anything. So I'll dive straight in now to the first concept, which is the measurement protocol. So what is the measurement protocol? The measurement protocol is a kind of published format for pushing hit level data into Google Analytics. So Google, if you install your regular tracking script on every page of your website, Google Analytics have written a JavaScript library that collects lots of information about what's going on, where you've come from, what the source of your visit is, and it pushes this information from the website into Google Analytics, and it does that using its own measurement protocol. And they've been kind enough to publish what that format is, so we now as developers and businesses can implement that to push data in from other sources, not just your website. So when I say other sources, we can do this from literally any networked device or application. So I've given 3 examples there. That might be from your server, it might be from point of sale applications and hardware in stores, or it could be from a tablet, a field sales operative using a tablet. So yeah, and you can literally push any type of hit data that Google Analytics knows about. The main ones are page views and events and transactions, but there are a few different other types. So just to give a bit more detail on what the measurement protocol is, because it sounds very scary, and ultimately It's not. It's kind of, in its simple terms, it's a URL that you dynamically construct and put certain parameters in that URL. So here, most of you are probably familiar with this account ID, the UA-XXX-Y. This is something that's on every page of your website, and it's the account that we're pushing data to. This is another example. The CID stands for Client ID, and this is an identifier that identifies the person. I'll be talking more about that shortly. And then there's other information that this final piece here is just the type of hit we're sending. In this example, a page view, but it could be an event or transaction or any other type of hit. So to further illustrate the types of hits we're going to send using the measurement protocol, I've given a couple of examples here. So the first one is, if you've got Salesforce as your CRM and somebody books a meeting, that's a key thing we want to know about and push into your analytics account. So typically we would send an event which is a Google Analytics concept that you can track from your website, but we could track it from the measurement protocol also. And that event is might look like the example shown there. The second example I've got is, if you've got a point of sale technology in all of your shops, when somebody makes a purchase, we can also track that with certain information like the transaction ID and the transaction total. All the information you would normally track online, we can push in from point of sale. So yeah, that's kind of sums up the measurement protocol really. It's not as complex as it sounds, and a developer certainly would find this very easy to implement. The key bit and the hard bit is finding the triggers within your systems and software to fire them from. So moving on then, so the second bit is I talked about this join key, and I said before there's two ways we can do this. The first of which is to use Google's own internal ID, which is referred to as the client ID. So when you visit a website that's got analytics installed, the tracking script you put on will check to see if there's a cookie that exists. If you've been to the website before, if it hasn't, it will set one up, and within that cookie it just creates a simple ID, and you can see exactly what that looks like on the screen now. And it's ultimately this ID that joins all your online activity together. So we basically need to get that ID and take it and use that to join things that go on offline with what goes on online. So to do that, there's a published kind of function that Google Analytics have provided as an interface to extract that. You could theoretically access the cookie directly, but there's a published function, and I've shown that here. So you can extract that ID quite straightforward and then use it as you need to really. And the way we would use it really, and I'll show here an example of the most common example, which is when somebody submits a form. So we would typically create a hidden field within that form and then insert the value, set the value of that to this client ID value, and then when someone submits that form, as well as the email and the name, you'll also get this client ID value stored alongside that record in your CRM. And once you've got that in that record, anything that goes on offline that relates to that person, we can track using the measurement protocol. We could literally track anything they do after that point. So I'll just illustrate now an example of what we've done using this technique before and kind of the power of what it can offer really. So we've implemented this on a law firm here in the UK, and law firm and compensation type keywords are very expensive. There's a lot of campaigns driving traffic to the website, so it's very important to understand what business they're generating. So we drive a lot of traffic to the website, and ultimately the aim is to get them to complete. It's a lead generation website. Ultimately, we want them to complete a form or phone up, and we call those actions. So once an action's occurred, a lot goes on after that. So typically they would qualify that action and if it's a valid kind of inquiry, they would enter it into their CRM, which is a kind of legal specific case management solution. So would see these inquiries in Proclaim, and then hopefully they'll go on to become cases, and hopefully they'll win those cases down the line. So that's kind of the situation. So just to talk you through the kind of what we did on this website. So I explained before how you would implement this for web forms. You know, if somebody fills in a web form, we've got the developers of the website to add the hidden field I mentioned before, and then we used Google Tag Manager just to populate the value, you know, the value of that hidden field with the client ID, so you know they didn't have to worry about that side. So every time that form now gets submitted, the client ID ends up in their CRM, and then we can use that however we want once that record exists. The second, you know, they get a lot of business over the phone, so not everyone fills in a form, and they've got a phone tracking solution called Response Tap. So I don't know if everyone knows what these solutions are, but ultimately every visitor to the website gets a unique number that relates only to them, and you know, if they then pick up the phone while they're within that session and phone the solicitors, they will, you know, we will track a phone call record and we'll track that into analytics. Ultimately, we've then done a bit of a customization to that solution, and we've been able to push this client ID via the Response Tap call record and managed to get it into Proclaim case management software. And once again that client ID is in that solution, we can then push any information about what happens offline into Google Analytics. So you know, this slide is very high level, but it's just to say that it's not just limited to web forms. You know, if you take a lot of inbound phone calls, there are solutions that exist to do this with those also. So yeah, I suppose just to sum up the overall solution, then we've always had the ability to track web forms, page views and phone calls into Google Analytics, but the customization and integration now pushes this client ID into Proclaim their CRM, and once that information is there, we can track any information about what happens offline, so leads, opportunities and deals, or in their case it's kind of inquiries and cases and won cases. So just to kind of demonstrate the power of what this actually means, because it sounds good, but what does it actually mean to the client? You know, we managed to increase the profit dramatically on this particular account. In particular, we've got a 300% increase in high value cases. But you know, one of the main things that we did achieve was because we managed to understand the action to case, so this is people filling in web forms to actual cases and won cases, because we managed to understand those conversion rates by campaign, we managed to identify campaigns that were perceived as particularly low value to the client, but when we identified that this offline conversion rate was particularly high, even though the cases were a bit lower in value, it was actually a no-brainer really to push them quite a lot more, and in actual fact the client changed the whole business strategy on the back of this new insight. So yeah, so what I've just presented is the client ID, so using Google's ID and pushing it into your CRM. So this is an alternative method, and this is actually using an ID that already sits within your CRM. So to do that, so this is more typically used for people who log into your website and already have an account. So to implement this, we have to use an advanced feature of Google Analytics, and it's called the user ID feature, surprisingly. And all that means is really, on every time somebody visits your website and logs in and authenticates who they are, we need to output at every opportunity the ID of that person from your CRM into the tracking code. So here you've got, I've just showed in red there what exactly that would look like in the tracking code. So once you've done that, and if you could do that at every opportunity and every visit that somebody has, you'll be able to join all those sessions with what goes online. So we'll instead of using the client ID, when you push information about what's happening offline using the measurement protocol, we'll use this user ID and we'll be able to join it to all the online sessions that have also got this user ID. If sometimes people don't log in a session, but the critical point really is if we need to make sure that ID is output on any sessions where we want to strongly link to the offline activity. So in the example of the sample website I showed earlier, you would want to make sure that they create an account and you output this ID on the thank you page when they requested that sample. So I've just given here an example scenario, and this is a kind of the office supplies example I referred to before. So we're talking kind of B2B, it might be office supplies, or it might be a traditional catalogue company, but you know, a company like this has lots of activity that goes on offline, so you'll be able to track things like, you know, direct marketing activity, and it's not just tracking it so you can analyze what's happening. You know, you could actually determine from what goes on online who you should direct market to. So you might be able to create segments and groups of users that have shown certain behavior online. So, you know, in this example, that have come via pay-per-click and then visited again shortly after by brand. You might be able to define these people, work out who they are from Google Analytics, and then work out who to market to, as well as analysing that data. You know, we can track in-store or phone transactions and show those related and linked to what's going on online. And for the first time now, using the latest version of Google Analytics, we could track refunds. So this is quite a big problem for the fashion industry, where you've got quite high return rates. Yeah, and another example might be catalogs. So if you send out catalogs to customers you know about, you know, there's two things we could do here. We could kind of understand which customers respond to those catalogs, and you know, we could spot the ones that are visiting the website shortly after, and the other thing we could do is kind of create remarketing audiences on the back of that, so we can complement what you do offline with what you do online. So, you know, like you say, if you want to follow up and coordinate a direct mail or a catalogue campaign with online remarketing, you can kind of do this now, so you get people from every angle. So yeah, you know, each scenario is very different and very complex, but I hope that gives you a bit of a taste really for what we are talking about. User ID, so just a couple of points really on how to maximize the effectiveness of the kind of user ID feature. The main thing really is to try and adopt a persisted login. So you can only join sessions together when they're logged in. So if you can, even if they don't particularly log in, if you know who they are because you've set cookies, try and output that user ID at every opportunity really. So finally, just a bit of a slide on which I've presented two options. I'd just like to present kind of which one you should use and when. So the client ID solution is really more suitable when there's no logged in kind of authenticated website, and really when the journey starts online but then everything transfers offline. So the B2B lead generation example. The user ID feature is more suited when you've got a logged in solution and when you're trying to track and understand an ongoing relationship. So yeah, that's kind of the solution then. So I just wanted to run through one last slide and talk you through kind of the benefits really of what this all gives you. So it'll give you a much improved understanding of attribution and how that correlates with what's going on offline. You know, you'll be able to optimize online campaigns for the true ROI that they're generating. You'll be able to understand how online and offline relate to each other and how they work with each other. And you'll also be able to coordinate and join up your marketing efforts with online and offline. Finally, last 2 points, you'll be able to link your kind of in-store sales to what's going on online, and you'd also be able to, for the first time, understand the effect of returns at campaign level and really understand how that's working. So yeah, I guess that leaves us with any questions then, and I'll hand you back over to Chris, who I think's been making a list of people's questions. But if anyone's got anything, then please do keep chatting those in.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Paul. Really appreciate that insight and information. We do have a few questions that we can run through. Thanks for sending those in. The first one that we have here is, so we are a B2C company but don't have a login, as these are one-off sales, and it gives the example of watches and jewelry, Paul. Should we use a client ID or a user ID?
Okay, thanks, Chris. And yeah, I suppose this then is a typical example of the thing that starts online and finishes offline. So I would definitely say here a client ID is the better solution. Certainly, if they don't log in, there's very little opportunity to use the user ID solution anyway. But ultimately, you're looking to extend that online session and just supplement it with what people eventually go on to do, and there's no real ongoing relationship. So yeah, client ID is the solution I would propose.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Another question is in relation to Salesforce CRM. So we use Salesforce CRM. Is it possible to do measurement protocol from a similar kind of CRM system, or Salesforce in particular, I guess?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the simple answer is yes. It definitely is. I think I'm right in saying that you might need to have the enterprise edition to Salesforce, but most CRM solutions should let you run scripts on certain actions and events that occur. Salesforce is built to be customized and fitted to your business. So yeah, it certainly is a possibility with Salesforce.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Another one here, so we're a retailer. How do I marry up my online database with in-store shoppers if I currently don't gather any customer data in stores? What's the solution there?
So I suppose if you can't identify those people when they're in your store, that there isn't really a solution, using what we've proposed at least. So the ways people identify shoppers, more and more frequently now, I'm getting asked in shops, would you like your receipt emailed to you? And they use that email to match up with online accounts, and that's one method retailers are using quite often. Or they might just ask you to confirm who you are and link you to an account. In an ideal world, you'd have a store loyalty card, but only kind of big supermarkets and the really big stores have that luxury. But that's the ultimate way of identifying people. There are workarounds, and you can kind of use things like print a voucher type of thing, which is a bit of a it's a less perfect solution, shall we say, but there are ways of getting around it as well.
Okay, thanks. I have one more here. So my company is already swimming in data, it says here, and setting up these additional tracking techniques will probably cost time and money. What sort of KPIs would you suggest we use to make sure that we're making the most of this additional data and justifying the spend? So I guess that's around measurement, how we measure in the effectiveness of the additional work that we're doing around tracking attribution.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So yeah, I guess, so if I could clarify what that means, when you say what sort of KPIs would you suggest, I take that to mean what do you want to track? And I suppose that's understanding how big this offline problem is to your business, and that will help you determine how much of a need there is to implement the solution. So, yeah, it's ultimately about working out what goes on offline, how big the need is to understand that, and then kind of costing up the kind of effort that's involved to do this kind of thing. And I would say that it's not, in my experience, it's not as big a project as a lot of people first perceive. But yeah, I suppose we need to understand and discuss, how big the problem is for your business. Certainly the impact it can have on companies like the law firm that I showed you. It transformed the business. And it enabled some dramatically different decisions to what we were planning on doing. So it can be business changing.
Yeah, following on from that, I mean, given that it does have the potential to really impact a company's business and really set them apart from competition, why do you think that so few people are currently doing attribution properly, or so many people really are afraid of doing it and think it's so difficult? I think the stats I gave at the beginning from the Google study said that I think 80% of people surveyed said it was the biggest challenge, and around 70% of those people thought that it was just too difficult and they struggled to know where to start. I guess it's pretty complex, but it doesn't seem to be as complex as people make out. Where do you feel that why aren't more people doing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, that, Chris. I suppose the key thing is, it's a lot of people aren't aware that you can do it. So hopefully the people on this webinar now, know that we can do these things. And I suppose the other thing is kind of fear of how hard it is, and it's actually relatively straightforward, especially if you engage with somebody like Search Laboratory who can just talk you through the process and clearly specify what's needed, hold developers' hands and talk them through what's needed. I guess it's a kind of a combination, Chris, of not knowing it can be done and being a bit fearful of what it is, how hard it is.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Paul. Well, we're drawing to the end, and that's probably all the time we have for questions. Just in summary, to summarize what we've been through, so you can really post almost anything into analytics, and really the aim is to create yourself a view of business value in your analytics dashboard, rather than just whether it be inquiries or samples or one-off sales. So thanks very much for that, Paul. Hopefully everybody found that interesting and insightful. If anybody does have any follow-up questions, then please feel free to get in touch. Or indeed, if you have any general questions about analytics or digital marketing strategy generally, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to have a conversation with you individually. And finally, thanks everybody for your time today. Again, we hope you found it insightful and useful, and we look forward to sharing more insights soon. Thank you very much.